Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to the Lulu Essey podcast, where we build mental fitness, confidence, and self-love without following someone else's blueprint. This podcast is about personal growth on your terms, doing the real inner work of building that self-love and that self-worth from the inside out. These are honest conversations about becoming who you really are, with simple tools that meet you exactly where you are. This is unedited and always from the heart. I invite you to open your heart and your mind as we get into today's conversation. For those on YouTube, you'll see that I'm traveling, so my background is different. Today, I'm doing something I've never done before on this podcast. I'm starting a 3-part series about something deeply personal, more personal than my struggles with self-worth, more personal than my relationship with perfectionism, more personal than anything I've explored in the 69 episodes we've been together. I'm going to tell you about my brain. Specifically about the 30 years I've spent trying to manage, medicate, stabilize, and live with severe bipolar disorder. And today I'm going to talk about a treatment, ketamine treatment, that I'm currently undergoing that has changed everything I thought I knew about what was possible and is possible for me. Over the next 3 weeks, I'm going to walk you through the full journey. This episode is about the 30-year road that led me to this moment. And next week, I'll share what happened when I started the treatment, what the sessions are actually like, what I felt, what surprised me. And in part 3, I'll reflect on what 3.5 months of treatment have taught me about my brain, my bipolar, and the inner work I've been doing on this podcast all along and long before. I'm going to share my intravenous ketamine treatment with you. But before I go any further, I need to be radically clear, transparent and direct at the very beginning of our journey together over these next 3 episodes. I am not a therapist, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychiatrist, and I am not recommending ketamine treatment to anyone. What I am is someone who has lived with bipolar disorder for over 30 years, who has tried nearly everything available, and who wants to share honestly and without filter what this particular experience has been like for me. This is my story. It is not medical advice. I'm sharing these episodes because perhaps they will open a gateway to your own thinking. Always talk to your psychiatrist, your doctor, your treatment team. Do your own research. Make your own informed decisions together with the people who know your medical history. So why am I sharing this now? I have a deep desire to be of service, and especially when it comes to people who are struggling with their mental health. That's what this podcast has always been about. If pulling back the curtain on something deeply personal opens an avenue for even one person who is struggling, who has tried everything and still feels like they're barely keeping their head above water, then it's worth the vulnerability. From my own experience, I listen to the experts and respect what they have to say. That said, it is a very different conversation when you hear from someone who has been through what I have been through. There's something else I want to be upfront about. I came to discover this treatment myself. I wasn't referred to it. I researched it for a few years, actually. I brought it to my psychiatrist and said, I think we should try this. And he supported it. But it was my idea. And I really feel that that matters. Because at the core of everything I talk about on this podcast, self-trust, self-advocacy, self-love, and doing the inner work, this is what it looks like in practice. It's knowing your own body well enough and trusting yourself enough to explore what's available to you. It's not handing your agency over to anyone, not even the people with the training and with the degrees, but working with them as an active participant in your own healing. I actively work with the doctors I have entrusted to assist me in my care. So this is a permission slip to advocate for yourself, not to go rogue, but to be an active participant in your own journey. The same kind of permission slip I've been offering on this podcast from episode 1. And before we go further, please share this episode with anyone who lives with bipolar, who loves someone with bipolar, or who has felt like they've exhausted every option. A share takes a few seconds, and it could change how someone sees themselves. So let me take you back. I was diagnosed in my very early 20s. It was pretty radical. I had started exhibiting psychosis, hearing voices, seeing things, smelling things that were not in my 3D reality. My hospitalizations began within days of my diagnosis. And it took the doctors a while to confirm the diagnosis because a lot of the symptoms I was presenting are very similar to schizophrenia. Over the past 30 years, I've been on lithium, Rohypnol, Risperdal, Prozac, Wellbutrin, Valium, Stilnox, Abilify, Lamictal, Trazodone, Seroquel, Tegretol, Clonopin, Lorazepam, Gabapentin, Zyprexa, Zoloft, Effexor, Topamax, Xanax, Davigo, Neurontin, in no particular order. Some of them are mood stabilizers, some are sedatives, anticonvulsants, and antipsychotic drugs, and some are antidepressants. And there are actually more on this list, but I think it's long enough. And many of these drugs came with side effects that were brutal, soul-crushing. But one part of my treatment stands out in particular. Part of my treatment at one stage also involved ECT, or electroconvulsive therapy. My personal experience of ECT was hard, traumatic, and difficult to process, and I'll leave it there for now. For those who don't know what ECT is, this is a formal, unemotional description. Electroconvulsive therapy is a medical procedure in which a controlled electrical current is passed through the brain under general anesthesia. Small electrodes are placed on the scalp to intentionally trigger a seizure that are said to relieve severe psychiatric symptoms such as major depression, bipolar disorder, and catatonia. I had many rounds of ECT at different times. Each round was administered Monday through Friday, sometimes for as long as 3 weeks at a time. For me, it didn't make a significant difference, and it has profoundly affected my long-term memory. And I do acknowledge that the treatment does work for some. We're all different. Today, I'm what's called a high-functioning bipolar, but that label hides a lot of the struggle. Medication was a lifesaver for me, and at the same time, it doesn't give without taking, and what it takes from you can come at a very high price. Your self-confidence, through side effects that can be so challenging to manage. Early on in my journey, I gained a radical amount of weight due to the side effects of some of the drugs I was on, as well as the level of sedation I was under. I was often very foggy in my head, slow, slurred speech, bad coordination, tremors. It was a rough road until I adjusted to the right meds and learned to manage the side effects. It took years to find the right cocktail, and a relapse would come, and it felt like I had to start from scratch. And I am not anti-medication. I know this is a controversial topic, but I couldn't have managed without it. And then last year, I started falling, and I kept falling. The pit felt like it was bottomless, and I just couldn't get a grip on my depression. My psychiatrist started upping my meds. I know the deal. And this time, nothing was shifting. I mean, nothing. Meds I usually responded to were just not making any meaningful difference. I was on 100 milligrams of Lamictal, 300 of Wellbutrin, 2 milligrams of Clonopin, and 450 milligrams of Trazodone. That's enough to put a horse down. And going back on Abilify was seeming very likely. I stopped going to Pilates because I was so slow and uncoordinated that it made it humiliating and distressing for me. I had no appetite, couldn't sleep, and I was terrified that the meds were not shifting anything. They never work instantly, but usually within a few weeks, you start feeling a shift. But this time was very different, and what scared me the most was the pace at which I was deteriorating. I was desperate. And as you know, I am now working in a freelance capacity, and I had commitments, and I needed to keep functioning. I was so scared because I've seen this movie before. And that's when I remembered. A couple of years earlier, I had done some research into ketamine treatment. I'd read about it, looked into the studies. I really got quite deep into it. But it was just interesting at that point. And now I thought, this could help me. I felt an immediate intuition, a feeling in my body. It was visceral. This is what I needed to try. So I went back to the research, the peer-reviewed studies out of institutions like Harvard, Stanford, Johns Hopkins. Studies showing that IV ketamine could produce rapid, significant results for people with treatment-resistant depression, and importantly for me, bipolar depression. Research showing that it works through a completely different mechanism than traditional psychiatric medication, targeting glutamate and neuroplasticity rather than just serotonin and dopamine. The science is there. It's published, it's peer-reviewed, and it's growing. If you're interested, I'd encourage you to look it up for yourself. So I went to my psychiatrist and asked him what he thought about me trying this treatment. He came back with an unequivocal yes. I think it's a great idea. And then another battle began. Despite all of this research, despite nearly 2 decades of clinical use, most insurance companies in the United States still classify IV ketamine as investigational and experimental, which means they won't cover it. which means it's only available to people who can pay out of pocket. And I want to sit with that for a moment because it matters. There are people right now, today, who could benefit from this treatment and are unable to access it. Not because it doesn't work, but because the system isn't set up to support us getting better. And I am acutely aware of the privilege in being able to afford this, and that awareness stays with me during every single session. My psychiatrist connected me with a ketamine clinic, and my intake began. Next bump in the road, I was on a sleeping tablet, Klonopin, which is a benzodiazepine, a class of sedative that is prescribed for anxiety and sleep. This class is commonly called a benzo. The clinic would not give me treatment until I had weaned off the benzo because it blunts the efficacy of ketamine. So it was another delay, because you cannot just stop taking a benzo. You can't go cold turkey because of its addictive nature. You have to wean off on a safe schedule. And I was so impatient at this point because I was in hell, but I accepted it. I've also seen this movie before. So weaning off the program to prepare for this first treatment with something I had done before. I had weaned off other drugs. That's where I'm going to leave it today, on the threshold, because that moment, the moment of deciding, of advocating for myself, of trusting my own instinct about my own body and my own mind, that moment is everything this podcast is about. I have been a participant in my treatment, asking, questioning, searching, researching, actively listening. And I really took being a participant to the next level. It's all the inner work I have done over the decades that allowed me to take this place naturally. And that is one of the deepest reasons I have for believing that it all starts on the inside. Next week in part 2, I'm going to tell you what happened when I said yes. I'll tell you what the IV sessions are actually like. I'll tell you about what I felt during treatment, what I felt after, what surprised me, and what filled me with awe. And I invite you to walk alongside me. Please share this episode. Share it with someone who lives with bipolar. Share it with someone who loves someone with bipolar. Share it with someone who has ever felt like they've tried everything and nothing is working. Sometimes all it takes is hearing one person's story to realize there might be a door you haven't opened yet. You can watch this episode on my YouTube channel. Check out my new background while I travel. Or you can see my shorts, which are bite-sized tools to build mental fitness one step at a time. And hit subscribe while you're there. And as always, what comes from the heart reaches the heart. And today, with profound respect for anyone who is fighting a battle with their own brain, and with gratitude for whatever brought you to this episode, this comes straight from my heart to yours. I'll see you next week for part 2.